All right, let's talk about something that can get, well, pretty awkward. Broken engagements. What happens when I do suddenly turns into I really, really don't? It turns out the legal answers to that question have changed a ton over the years, and they actually tell us a whole lot about how we think about love, marriage, and yeah, money.
I mean, just picture it for a second. The wedding is off. You've spent a small fortune on deposits, vendors, you name it. And on top of all that, there's the big question: what happens with the ring? This isn't just about good manners, folks. It's a real legal mess. So let's get into how the law has tried to untangle it.
So, for a really long time, the law had a pretty wild solution. If someone broke off an engagement with you, you could literally sue them for breaking your heart. No joke. It was a real legal claim called breach of promise to marry. And this wasn't some newfangled idea either. Suing someone for backing out of a wedding has super deep roots. We're talking Roman law, old Germanic customs, English courts, all the way to the American colonies. You see, for a huge chunk of history, marriage was seen less as a romantic partnership and more like, well, a business deal, a property transaction. So here's the key thing to understand. The law basically treated a broken engagement like a personal injury. Think about it like a car crash or slipping on a wet floor. The person who was left behind, and yeah, it was usually the woman, could sue for everything: the money she lost, the damage to her reputation, and even for her emotional suffering. But you can probably see where this is going, right? A system that lets you sue someone for a broken heart? Yeah, that was just ripe for abuse. And it didn't take long for things to get really messy. By the time the 1930s rolled around, these lawsuits had a terrible reputation. Newspapers were calling them extortion and blackmail rackets. And you can see why. The threat of a very public, very scandalous trial was a powerful weapon. Juries were often super sympathetic, so you could get these massive payouts. It was basically legal blackmail. So the backlash came, and it came fast. It kicked off in Indiana in 1935. States started passing what they called anti-heart balm laws, which just completely wiped these lawsuits off the books. The whole era of suing for a broken heart was officially over. Okay, so you can't sue for a broken heart anymore. So now what? Well, the law had to find a new way to deal with these breakups. And it decided to zoom in on one very specific, very sparkly piece of property. Yep, you guessed it, the engagement ring. And this is where we get to a really important legal idea: the conditional gift. Here's the modern rule in a nutshell. An engagement ring isn't just a regular gift, like for a birthday. It's a gift with a string attached. And that string is the wedding itself. If the wedding doesn't happen, the condition isn't met, and legally, the ring has to go back to whoever gave it. So how do courts actually figure this out? Well, the old way was a total mess. Judges would try to figure out who was to blame for the breakup. But today, most places have moved to a no-fault system. And that means it doesn't matter why the wedding was called off. The only thing that matters is that it was called off. And this quote from a case back in '87 just nails the modern thinking perfectly. The judge basically says, how on earth is a court supposed to decide who's at fault? Because he doesn't have a sense of humor? Because they like different music? The point is, you don't need a reason. The law today gets that the entire point of an engagement is to figure out if you're a good match. And if you're not, it should be easy to walk away, not something you get punished for. Okay, so the ring has a pretty clean legal answer now, but what about all the other money? Because let's be real, the financial stakes are massive. We're talking an average wedding cost of around $30,000. And here's the kicker: most of that cash is just gone. Think about it. All those non-refundable deposits for the venue, the caterer, the photographer, the band, that 50% you put down on the dress, it adds up so fast. And with this modern no-fault rule, there's basically no way to sue your ex to get that money back. Whoever paid for it is usually just out of luck. So this leads us to the final chapter in this story. How are modern couples dealing with all this? Well, they're taking matters into their own hands. The thinking is, if the courts aren't going to help sort out the money side of a breakup, maybe a contract can. Now, this quote from a legal scholar named Henry Maine might look a little heavy, but the idea behind it is huge. He's talking about this giant shift in society. We've moved from a world where your relationships were defined by your status, like being a fiancé, to a world where we define our relationships ourselves through agreements. And the prenup? It's the perfect example of that in action. And this is not just some academic theory either. Just look at the numbers. The percentage of married couples who have a prenup has jumped from just 3% to 15% in about a decade. That is a huge increase. It's a real trend that's happening right now. So what's driving this? Well, the reasons are actually super practical. For one, people are getting married older, so they have more of their own assets and their own debts, like student loans. Many have kids from previous relationships they want to protect. And honestly, there's just more of an understanding that, hey, divorce is a real thing, and it's probably smart to have a plan just in case. So what's the big takeaway from all this? We've gone on this journey, right, from the law policing broken hearts to a really simple rule about a ring, all the way to today, where courts pretty much stay out of it, and where the law has stepped back, contracts and personal responsibility have stepped in. So as we move from these heartfelt promises to actual clauses on paper, are we just being more realistic about modern relationships, or are we maybe losing something important along the way? It's a really interesting question to chew on.